For 7 years, every single Sunday, an old woman carried a sick child down a crumbling porch, walked 2 miles to church, and laid that boy in a pew while she prayed for a miracle the doctors said could never come. Then one Sunday, a black SUV pulled up. 3 men in dress blues, ribbons shining, stepped out and walked straight to her door. She had no idea the military had been watching her. She had no idea the boy she'd been carrying wasn't just sick. He was someone they'd been searching for since the day he was born. Her name was Verdell Frazier, widowed, 72. The child in her arms was Marcus, her grandson, 8 years old, half a heart, lungs that drowned him. For 7 years, through snow and heat, she carried him to church believing God would heal him. But the generals on her porch hadn't come for a healing. They'd come because Marcus wasn't just a sick boy, he'd been a missing person since birth. Verdell had learned a long time ago that when 3 cars arrive at a house like hers, it is never good news. But those cars were military, not police. And the men walking up her path wore stars on their shoulders, not badges. She pulled Marcus closer, felt his thin chest rattle against her arm, and she could not imagine what the United States Armed Forces wanted with a boy who could barely climb 3 stairs without gasping for air. The story began 8 years earlier, in a town called Bellwood, just west of Chicago. Verdell's daughter, Tanya, was 22 years old and pregnant. Tanya had always been wild, the way wind is wild, untamable, beautiful, carrying a storm just beneath her skin. She disappeared 2 days after Marcus was born, walked out of the hospital, left the baby in the nursery, and vanished into a winter afternoon. Nobody heard from her again. Not a phone call, not a letter, not a single word in 8 years. The hospital called Verdell. She arrived with nothing but a diaper bag someone had donated and a faith that had survived a dead husband, a dying neighborhood, and a lifetime of losses that would have broken anyone else. The doctors pulled her into a cold room and explained that Marcus had been born with a catastrophic heart defect, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Half his heart was missing, the left side barely formed. He also had underdeveloped lungs, pulmonary hypoplasia. He needed machines to breathe, tubes to eat, and at least 3 open heart surgeries before his 5th birthday just to have a chance at seeing kindergarten. The hospital estimated the cost of his care would run into the millions. They asked if she had insurance. She had Social Security, a widow's pension, and a 2-bedroom house that was paid off because her husband had bought it with cash in 1972. But Verdell signed the papers. She became his legal guardian, then his foster mother, then his whole world. The state gave her a small stipend for kinship care, less than $400 a month. The rest she scraped together from her own checks, from church collections, from neighbors who left casseroles on her porch like they were leaving medicine. A woman who spent her days watching her grandson fight to breathe learned how to stretch money the way she stretched prayers, thin but never breaking, always just enough to get through one more night. The first surgery came when Marcus was 3 months old, the Norwood procedure. It should have taken 6 hours. It took 11. Marcus coded twice on the table. Twice they brought him back, his tiny heart refusing to stop beating, and Verdell knew then that this child was not going anywhere. He was a fighter, a survivor, and something else, something she couldn't name but felt deep in her bones every time she held him. The second surgery came at 8 months. The Glen recovery was harder, his lungs filled with fluid. They said he might not leave the ICU, but 37 days later, Verdell walked him out of that hospital in her arms, the same way she had carried him in. By the time Marcus was 2, he was on oxygen around the clock. A thin plastic tube ran from a tank to his nose, and he dragged that tank behind him like a toy. Verdell learned how to change the cannula, how to read the saturation monitor, how to sleep with one eye open listening for a change in his breathing. She became a nurse without a degree, a therapist without a license, a mother all over again at 64. And through all of it, through every surgery and every setback, every time a doctor said, "Prepare yourself," she carried Marcus to church. Every single Sunday, first in her arms when he was small, then on a cart she built from a folding stroller and a car seat when he got bigger. Then on her hip, his legs dangling past her knees, his breathing wet and labored, but his eyes always open, taking in the music, the light through the stained glass, the sound of his grandmother praying beside him. She believed with everything she had that God was going to heal that boy. That one Sunday she would walk into church with Marcus, and he would walk out on his own 2 feet. What she did not know, what no one had told her in all those years, was that while she was praying for a miracle, someone else was searching for the child in her arms. Someone who had been looking since the day he was born. and the three generals now walking toward her front door were not coming to offer condolences. They were coming to ask Verdel a question that would change everything she thought she knew about the boy she had raised. The oldest of the three generals reached the porch first. He was tall, silver-haired, with a chest full of ribbons and a face that had witnessed things he would never speak about. He removed his cap and held it against his heart. The other two flanked him like sentinels. Verdel did not open the screen door. She looked at them through the mesh and felt Marcus press his face into her shoulder, his breathing wet and shallow. "Mrs. Frazier," the lead general said, "my name is General Samuel Hartley. This is General Marcus Denton and General Lionel Stiles. We are with the Department of Defense. We're not here to cause trouble. We need to speak with you about the boy." Verdel's grip tightened. "Marcus ain't done nothing wrong. He's been sick since birth. He can barely walk." The general's eyes softened. "You know, ma'am, we know everything. His medical history, the surgeries, the 7 years of Sundays you've carried him to church. We've been looking for him for a very long time." That was the sentence that unlocked the door, not the stars or the ribbons, the fact that they knew about the Sundays. Verdel unhooked the latch and stepped back, pulling Marcus closer, and the three generals filed into her front room like they were entering a cathedral. General Hartley asked to sit. Verdel nodded at the plastic-covered sofa. They sat. Marcus watched them from her lap, his eyes the only part of him that never seemed sick, wide and black and absorbing everything. "I'm going to tell you a story," General Hartley began, "and very little of it is going to make sense at first, but I need you to stay with me because the ending is something you deserve to hear." He looked at Marcus, then back at Verdel. 8 years ago, there was a young army captain stationed at Fort Bragg. His name was Marcus Cole. He was a ranger, one of the best, decorated twice for valor. In July of that year, he returned from a tour in Afghanistan and took a 2-week leave in Chicago to visit family. While he was there, he met a young woman named Tanya Frazier. They were together for less than a week. He never told his family, never told his command. She was a secret he kept because he didn't know how to talk about her. When he went back to base, he had no idea she was pregnant. Verdel's breath caught. She knew her daughter. She knew Tanya's wildness, the way she burned through relationships like matches, but she had never known the father's name. Tanya had refused to say. General Hartley continued. 3 weeks before Marcus was born, Captain Cole was deployed again, this time to a remote outpost in Nuristan. His unit was ambushed. He was listed as missing in action for 18 months before they recovered his remains. He never knew he had a son, and his family, they never knew either. Verdel's hands were shaking. "You're telling me my grandson's father was a soldier?" "I'm telling you more than that, Mrs. Frazier." General Hartley leaned forward. "The reason we found you now is because the Army reopened all cold case MIA files 3 years ago. They ran advanced DNA comparisons against the National Missing Persons Database, and last month, a match came back. A blood sample taken from Marcus during his last surgery matched the remains of Captain Marcus Cole. The boy in your arms is the only living child of a man who died a hero." The room fell silent. The clock on the mantel ticked. Marcus stirred, whispered something about being thirsty. Verdel didn't move. She was trying to hold the pieces of this revelation together, but they kept slipping. "All right," she said slowly. "You found his father, and I'm grateful to know. But why send 3 generals to tell me that? Why not a phone call? Why not a letter?" General Hartley glanced at the other 2 generals. The exchange was subtle, but Verdel caught it. Something heavier was coming. "Because Captain Cole was not just any soldier," General Hartley said. "His father, the boy's grandfather, is General Alastair Cole, 4-star general, and for the last 2 years, he has been the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff." Verdel's mind went blank. General Alastair Cole, the most powerful man in the United States military, the face on every news broadcast when wars started and ended, the man who advised presidents. And that man's son had fathered her grandson in a week-long fling in Chicago and then died in a valley in Afghanistan without ever knowing. His wife, Margaret Cole, passed away 3 years ago, General Hartley said. They had no other children. Marcus Cole was their only son, and until 6 weeks ago, General Cole believed his entire family line had died with him in those mountains. He spent his retirement alone in a house full of medals with no one to pass them to. He paused. Then the DNA match came through, and he learned he had a grandson who's been fighting for his life just like his father did. Marcus had drifted into a light sleep against Verdel's chest, his breathing still heavy but steady. Verdel looked down at him, at the thin little body she had carried through so much. And then she looked at the generals. "So what happens now?" she asked. "You want to take him? You want him to go live with some stranger because he's got stars on his shoulder?" General Hartley shook his head. "No one is taking anyone anywhere, Mrs. Frazier. General Cole is not asking for custody. He's asking to meet his grandson. There is something he wants to tell the boy in person, something he's been waiting to say for 8 years." He folded his hands. "But there's a complication. General Cole is dying. He has pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He has weeks, maybe days. And he is asking if you would bring Marcus to him at Walter Reed Hospital, not as a soldier to a civilian, as a grandfather to a grandson. One meeting, that's all he's asking." Verdell stared at him. For 7 years, she had carried this child through fire, through 11 surgeries, through heart failure and lung collapse and doctors who told her to prepare for the worst. She had prayed for a miracle, and now a miracle was here, but it wasn't the one she expected. It was a grandfather. A dying old man who wanted to lay eyes on the only blood he had left. She looked at the 3 generals. "And if I say no," General Hartley didn't flinch, "then we leave, and we never contact you again. You are his legal guardian, Mrs. Frazier. You have raised him. You have saved his life more times than any of us can count. We are not here to pressure you." But then the youngest general, Stiles, spoke for the first time. His voice was quieter. "Mrs. Frazier, I've been General Cole's aide for 6 years. I've never seen that man cry, not once. Last week, when the DNA results came back, he sat in his office and wept for an hour. All he wants is to say goodbye to something of his son. I'm not a family man, I don't have children, but I know grief when I see it, and that man is drowning in it." The room went still again. Marcus stirred, coughed, and settled back. Verdell looked at the wall where a crucifix hung, and she felt something shift in her heart. She had always believed that the purpose of suffering was to prepare you for a choice, and now the choice was here. "I'll take him," she said, "but not because of what you told me, because of what my own mother told me. She said every child deserves to know where they come from. Marcus is too sick to ever be a soldier, but he deserves to know his grandfather, even if only once." General Hartley nodded. "You'll make the arrangements. A military transport will take you both to Washington tomorrow morning." And then he added something that made Verdell's blood freeze. "But there's one more thing you should know. General Cole is not just asking to meet his grandson for a goodbye. He is considering something else entirely. He has asked his legal team to begin the process of transferring all of his assets, his estate, his entire life's accumulation, into a trust for Marcus. Marcus survives to 18, he will inherit one of the largest private fortunes in this country, and there is one condition attached. You have to approve it." Verdell stared at him. "What condition?" General Hartley locked eyes with her. "That the boy be raised within the Cole family tradition, that he attend a military preparatory school, that he be groomed to carry on the Cole legacy. He's offering you everything his grandfather has, but he's also asking for control of Marcus's future. And you have 48 hours to decide." Verdell didn't sleep that night. She sat in her worn recliner next to Marcus's bed and watched the oxygen monitor blink green and steady, the way she'd watched it 1,000 nights before. 48 hours. The words echoed in her skull like a hammer. A military preparatory school, the Cole legacy. She looked at Marcus's small chest rising and falling, the tube taped to his cheek, the scar that ran from his collarbone to his belly where surgeons had rebuilt his heart 3 times. This boy couldn't march. He couldn't do a single push-up. He got winded walking to the bathroom, and they wanted to groom him for a tradition built on strength and sacrifice, the very things his body had never possessed. But there was something else keeping her awake. A detailed General Hartley had mentioned that she didn't fully catch until the house was silent. He said they ran the DNA against the National Missing Persons database. Missing persons? Her daughter Tanya hadn't just disappeared. She'd never been reported missing. So whose database did they mean? The thought crawled into her mind and refused to leave. At dawn, she called her pastor, Reverend Wilkins. He arrived in 20 minutes, still in his house slippers, and sat with her at the kitchen table. She told him everything, the generals, the father, the dying grandfather, the fortune with strings attached. He listened without interrupting the way he always did. Then he took her hand. "Sister Frazier, the Lord didn't carry that boy through 11 surgeries just to hand him over to strangers. Whatever you decide as his grandmother first. The money is just paper. His soul is what matters." She nodded. She'd already known the answer. She just needed someone else to say it. The military transport arrived at 9 a.m., a black sedan with tinted windows. Verdell packed a bag with Marcus's medications, his portable oxygen concentrator, and the worn leather Bible she'd carried since her husband gave it to her on their wedding day. She dressed Marcus in his Sunday suit, the one he wore to church. It hung loose on his thin frame, but he looked proud. He always looked proud when he wore it. "Are the soldiers taking us to heaven, Grandma?" Marcus asked as she lifted him into the car. "No, baby, we're just going to Washington. There's an old man who wants to meet you." "Is he nice?" Verdell paused. "I don't know yet, but I think so." The flight took 2 hours. Marcus watched the clouds through the small window, his face pressed against the glass, fascinated. He'd never been on a plane, never been out of Illinois. He asked questions about everything: the shape of the wings, the uniforms on the crew, the way the ground looked like a patchwork quilt. For a few hours, he forgot he was sick. For a few hours, he was just a little boy on an adventure. They landed at Andrews Air Force Base and were driven directly to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The building was enormous, white, sprawling, nothing like the small community hospital where Marcus had spent so much of his life. Soldiers saluted as they passed. Nurses in crisp uniforms guided them through security checkpoints. Verdell carried Marcus the whole way, her arms aching but her grip never loosening. They stopped outside a private room on the 8th floor. General Hartley was waiting. "He's been asking for you all morning," he said. "He's very weak. He might not make it through the week. Whatever you need to say it now." Verdell pushed open the door. The room smelled like antiseptic and something softer underneath, flowers maybe, or old cologne. In the bed lay a man who looked nothing like the photographs she'd seen on the news. General Alastair Cole, 4-star general, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was reduced to a skeleton wrapped in hospital sheets. His skin was the color of old paper. His breathing was shallow and mechanical, assisted by a ventilator that hissed in the corner. But his eyes, when they opened and found Marcus, were on fire. "Marcus," the word came out as a dry whisper. "You look like him, you look like your father." Verdell set Marcus down on the edge of the bed. Marcus studied the old man with those wide, unblinking eyes. He didn't know this person, but something in his face softened the way it did when he met anyone who was hurting. "Are you my grandpa?" Marcus asked. General Cole's eyes filled with tears. They ran down the sides of his face and disappeared into the pillow. "Yes, son, I'm your grandpa. And I've been looking for you for a very long time." They talked for an hour. The general asked Marcus about school, about church, about the superheroes he liked. Marcus told him about Batman and the ocean he'd never seen, and how his grandma made the best pancakes on Saturday mornings. The general listened to every word like it was scripture. Every now and then he would glance at Verdell, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Not pride, not ownership, gratitude. But then the door opened, and a man in an expensive suit stepped inside. He carried a leather briefcase and the cold, impatient energy of someone who billed by the hour. "General Cole, I have the trust documents ready. We need to finalize the terms before you're no longer of sound mind." Verdell stiffened. The general's expression shifted, turning hard. "Not now, Clark. Sir, with respect, you're running out of time. The board is waiting. If we don't execute the transfer this afternoon, the estate enters probate and the charitable remainder trust kicks in. Marcus gets nothing." The general closed his eyes. "Bring me the papers." Clark opened the briefcase and laid out a stack of documents. Then he turned to Verdell. "Mrs. Frazier, I'm the family attorney. I need to explain the condition attached to this trust. It's non-negotiable." Verdell listened as Clark outlined the terms. If she signed, Marcus would become the sole beneficiary of the Cole estate, valued at over $60 million, but only if he was raised according to the Cole family charter. That meant enrollment in St. John's Military Academy beginning at age 10, followed by West Point or another service academy. Summers at military training camps. Mentorship under appointed guardians selected by the Cole family board. And a requirement that he serve at least 5 years in the United States Army upon graduation. "He's 8 years old with half a heart," Verdell said flatly. "He won't survive basic training. He won't even survive gym class." Clark didn't flinch. "The trust has a medical exemption clause for active duty, but the preparatory education is non-negotiable. The board believes the structure and discipline will be good for his character. And Mrs. Frazier, there is another matter." He pulled out a separate document. "Given your advanced age and limited financial resources, the Cole family board has already filed a motion for custodial review. If you refuse the trust, they will argue in court that Marcus's medical needs require the resources only the Cole estate can provide. They will seek guardianship on behalf of the family." Verdell felt the floor drop out from under her. This wasn't an offer. It was a trap. Sign and lose control of her grandson's life. refuse and risk losing him entirely to strangers who saw him not as a child, but as a legacy. She looked at General Cole. He was watching her, his face unreadable. "You knew about this," she said. "I did," he whispered. "I knew, and I'm ashamed. But I'm also dying, Mrs. Frazier. I can't stop the board. The only thing I can offer is a choice. Take the trust and give Marcus a future, a difficult one, but a future, or refuse it and let them fight you in court. Either way, he won't be the boy you raised on that porch in Bellwood." Marcus looked up from the bed, sensing the shift in the room. "Grandma, are you okay?" Verdell walked over and lifted him into her arms. She held him close, felt his heart beating against her chest, that half heart that had fought so hard, that she had prayed over and carried and loved for 8 years. She looked at General Cole, and then she said something that made everyone in the room freeze. "You think I don't know how to fight, General? I've been fighting for this boy since the day he was born. I fought doctors who said he wouldn't live a month. I fought insurance companies that refused to pay for his surgeries. I fought a system that wanted to put him in a state home and forget he existed." She lifted her chin. "You want to take me to court? Then do it. But I promise you this, by the time I'm done, the whole world is going to know how a 4-star general tried to steal a sick child from the grandmother who saved him. Your legacy won't be medals, it'll be this." The room went completely silent. Clark opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the heart monitor at General Cole's bedside began to scream. His face went gray. His eyes rolled back. Doctors burst through the door, shouting orders, pushing Verdell and Marcus into the hallway. She stood there, clutching her grandson, watching through the glass as they fought to bring the old man back. And in that chaos, Marcus looked up at her and said something that changed everything. "Grandma, I want to tell Grandpa something. He needs to know about the Blood Lady." Verdell stared down at her grandson, certain she had misheard him over the chaos of alarms and shouting doctors. But Marcus said it again, louder this time, pointing toward the glass door where the medical team was now working frantically on the general. "The Blood Lady, Grandma. He needs to know about the Blood Lady." She knelt down and held his thin shoulders. "What are you talking about, baby? What Blood Lady?" Marcus reached beneath his little jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a crayon drawing he had made weeks ago in the hospital playroom and never shown anyone. It was a stick figure of a woman in a white dress, brown skin like his, holding a red heart. And underneath, the nurses had helped him write one word: Margaret. "This is her," Marcus said. "The nurses told me she gives me blood so I can be strong. They showed me a picture of her from the wall in the blood bank. She has a smile like you, Grandma." Verdell's mind raced. Margaret. The name hit her like a freight train. Margaret Cole, the general's late wife who had died 3 years ago. She picked up the drawing and looked at it, her hands trembling. Then she walked toward General Hartley, who was standing frozen outside the hospital room, watching doctors try to restart the old man's heart. "General Hartley," Verdell said, holding out the drawing, "did Margaret Cole ever donate blood?" Hartley looked at the drawing, then at Verdell, and something shifted in his face, a crack in the carefully constructed wall. "She did," he said quietly. "Margaret was a registered donor for decades, AB-negative, rare type. She gave every 8 weeks for 40 years. It was her way of serving. The general never talked about it. It was her private thing." Verdell felt the air leave her lungs. AB-negative, the same rare type that ran through Marcus's veins. The blood that had kept him alive through 11 surgeries, through crisis after crisis, had been flowing from Margaret Cole long before anyone knew the boy existed. A grandmother who never knew she had a grandson, giving away the one thing he needed most, month after month, for years. "They never met," Verdell whispered. "She never got to hold him, never got to read him a story, never got to hear him call her grandma, but she was in his veins the whole time." Inside the room, General Cole's heartbeat stabilized. The medical team slowly backed away from the bed, their faces grim but relieved. He was alive barely, but the episode had taken what little strength he had left. The doctors waved Verdell and Marcus back inside. The general opened his eyes and found Marcus standing beside the bed, holding up the drawing. Verdell stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders. "General Cole," she said, her voice cracking but steady, "there's something you need to see. Your wife has been saving this boy's life since the day he was born, and she never even knew his name." The general looked at the crayon drawing, at the stick figure of a woman holding a red heart, and at the word Margaret printed in a child's unsteady letters. And for the first time since Verdell walked into that room, General Alistair Cole broke. Not the quiet tears of a dying man. The deep, shaking sobs of someone who had just discovered that the woman he'd loved and lost had been reaching across the grave to touch the child they never knew they had. When he could speak again, his voice was barely a whisper. She always said blood was sacred. She said giving it was the closest thing to prayer she'd ever found. And all this time she was praying for him, for our grandson. He turned to Clark, the attorney, who was still standing in the corner with his briefcase. Tear up the documents, tear up all of it. There will be no conditions, no military school, no custody motion. Mrs. Frazier will raise that boy however she sees fit, and the trust will pay for every surgery, every treatment, every single thing he needs, with no strings attached. Clark stammered, but General, the board answers to me for the few days I have left, and if they don't like it, they can take it up with me when I'm dead. The general reached out and touched Marcus's small hand. You don't need to be a soldier, son. You've already fought harder than anyone in this room. You just need to keep breathing. That's your only mission. Marcus looked up at Verdell. Does this mean we can go home now, Grandma? I miss church. Verdell pulled him close, tears streaming down her face. Yes, baby, we can go home. 2 days later, General Alastair Cole passed away, but before he died, he signed a new trust. Unconditional, irrevocable. The full $60 million of the Cole estate transferred into a medical trust for Marcus's lifelong care, with Verdell Frazier named as sole trustee and guardian until Marcus turned 25. The military preparatory condition was nullified. The custody motion was withdrawn. And in a final letter addressed to Verdell, the general wrote one sentence that she would keep in her Bible for the rest of her life. You carried him when I could not, and you loved him when I did not know he existed. There is no medal on my chest that compares to what you have done. A month later, on a crisp Sunday morning, Verdell walked down the steps of her porch in Bellwood. Beside her, Marcus held her hand and walked on his own 2 feet. He was still frail, still tethered to his oxygen tank, but his eyes were bright, and his smile was wide, and he was alive. The church bells rang across the neighborhood, and as they walked up the path to the sanctuary, she thought about the woman she'd never met, whose blood flowed in her grandson's veins. And she thought about all the invisible people who give of themselves without ever knowing whose life they're saving. And she knew, in a way she couldn't explain, that this was the miracle she had prayed for all those years. Not a cure, not a sudden healing, just connection, just the knowledge that no one is ever truly alone, and that the blood that binds us is older than any institution, deeper than any nation, and stronger than any force on earth. Verdell still lives in that same house in Bellwood. She still walks Marcus to church every Sunday, though now he walks beside her without needing to be carried. The medical trust pays for his treatments, his oxygen, and a future that once looked impossible, but she never spent a dime on herself. She still wears the same coats she's had for decades, still mends clothes rather than replace them, still stretches every dollar until it prays, because that was never about money either. It was about showing up. It was about the quiet, stubborn belief that love is a verb, not a feeling, and that the most powerful people in the world are the ones whose names you'll never know. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. Margaret Cole gave blood for 40 years. She never knew she had a grandson. She never knew her blood was keeping him alive. She just gave because that's what she believed in. And somewhere in a blood bank right now, there is a bag of AB negative or O positive or any other rare type donated by someone who will never meet the person it saves. That's the invisible thread that holds the world together. Not the speeches, not the medals, not the billions, the blood, the hours, the grandmothers who carry sick children to church for 7 years because no one else will. If this story touched you, there are 2 things you can do. First, find a blood drive and donate. It costs you nothing, and you might be the only match for a child you'll never meet. Second, look at the people you walk past every day, the aides, the cleaners, the grandmothers, the ones carrying invisible weight, and see them, not with pity, with respect, because there are heroes in your life right now whose names you have never bothered to learn. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their invisible work matters. And remember Verdell Frazier, a woman who proved that the strongest thing on earth isn't a soldier with a star on his shoulder. It's a grandmother with a child in her arms and a faith that will not break. Until next time, stay kind, stay giving, and never underestimate the power of what you can't see.